Sound the hype alarm. Less than 3 months after Sekiro, we already have Fromsoft's next project announced in all its glory, Elden Ring. Like many of you, I'd heard all the rumors. Something about great runes, George R.R. Martin, and Norse mythology. Well, now with the dust settling a bit after leaks and a cinematic trailer shaking many fans of the studio to their core, I'm here to break down what little we know with a little speculation of my own. Without further ado, let's talk Elden Ring. A month before the conference even began, there had been rumblings about a partnership between George R.R. Martin and Fromsoft. With the astronomical excitement behind the conclusion of Game of Thrones that fizzled out with a speed we all wish Martin would apply to Winds of Winter, fans were understandably interested in what other projects he'd been working on since he left those showrunners to flop around like Magikarp out of water. At first, I thought the concept sounded too far-fetched, but taking a look at Martin's blog post-season finale, there was confirmation right out in the open that he consulted on a video game out of Japan. And this was over 3 weeks ago. The pieces were there, but we had little idea what they would shape up to be. Cue Bandai Namco's leaky faucet 2 days before E3 began, and we got a still image with a name: Elden Ring. The leak was true enough, as we got a CG trailer at Microsoft's conference. The trailer opens with a rhythmic slam of a hammer as two legends' names appear on the screen, confirming their collaboration on a new world. We see a guy that looks like Shigaraki from Boku no Hero Academia meeting Gwyn, creating their own ring with artsy arms. The trailer shows a few knights, with the first equipping an arm, with the other looking wrought with disease. We see a spear-wielding knight ram into a massive warrior or beast, which could be this guy we catch a glimpse of later that wields something reminiscent of Yorm's machete. He also burns. We've got rings, and we've got fire. And all throughout, a guy who bears a striking resemblance to Khal Drogo is hammering away at an item with great light shimmering off of it. As he does, it appears to shatter along with himself. By the end, he and a woman he seems to be tied to are withering away, almost as if their body is cracking like porcelain. In other words, the world seems to be on the brink of destruction. Or maybe it already is, since Khal Drogo shattered the ring. So much of the trailer all speaks to things that I know Miyazaki loves to put into his worlds, and though I don't know George R.R. Martin as well, I know the guy loves fantasy. Everything they've shown is perfect to pique our interest to the max until we hear more. If you compare this to the teaser for Sekiro, there's so much more to unpack here, which is perfect for Souls fans that love to dig into the meaning behind Fromsoft's work. Though this also leaves us with a lot of questions. With Sekiro just off the presses, how long has this game been in development? Did this split Miyazaki's interest between the two titles? With a return to dark fantasy, will this be close to Dark Souls or something different? And will we get those signature FromSoft bosses in all their glory? Well, Miyazaki sat down with a Banco representative to answer some of these questions. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read the full interview, but I'll summarize the juicy parts here. First, let's talk development. According to Miyazaki, the game has been in development since the Ring City was completed, which was a bit over 2 years ago. For perspective on how development cycles have grown on Miyazaki's titles, Dark Souls was in development for 2 years, Bloodborne for 2.5, and Sekiro for just over 3 years. If we can expect this trend to continue to 3.5 years, we should see Elden Ring no later than fall 2020, but that is merely speculation. What Miyazaki does confirm is that the development process has been the same as Sekiro. There are co-directors for each project, with Miyazaki handling pieces of game design, art direction, and music. This allows him creative input on multiple titles at once and gives us as fans games to look forward to more often, though he does admit there is plenty work to be done still on Elden Ring. As for the genre, he clearly states it's a third-person action RPG. While Sekiro leaned heavily on action, Elden Ring will put emphasis on the RPG aspects. While the responsive melee combat Fromsoft is known for will be present, things like character creation and customization will be making a return. He goes on to say that you can expect the standard level of Fromsoft challenge in this game, as well as wide varieties of weapons, magic, and even goes as far to say that the title will have more variations to strategy, tactics, and builds in the Dark Souls series. In fact, Miyazaki made it clear the game is meant to be the dark fantasy title that's full of things they were never able to do in Dark Souls, the biggest of these changes being a true open world. Miyazaki claims it'll be their biggest title yet in terms of volume, and the depth and freedom that this provides the player with will be unprecedented for the studio. Despite the ambitious change in scope, it's mentioned that boss fights will still be a point of climax in the title, and mentions unique and horrifying bosses to look forward to. As for the story, he confirms that the trailer implies the destruction of the Elden Ring and the world that he and George R.R. Martin have collaborated to create will center around the significance of that event. He alludes to themes like free will and the ambition of mankind as well. All abstract ideas, but with two fantastic storytellers at the helm, I'm more than excited to see where they go with it. So what are my thoughts? I've gotta admit, I was skeptical before E3. The idea that we were already hearing of an original title so soon after Sekiro's release made me wonder if it wasn't being rushed, but that's more me being worried than actual reality. Fromsoft has done nothing but garner goodwill from its audience in my eyes in the Souls era, and with Sekiro being as phenomenal as it was in just 3 years of development, I'll be shocked if we don't see the same quality from Elden Ring. I was admittedly also hesitant about a return to dark fantasy. We've already seen 4 titles from the studio in this setting, with only 2 that branch out. I think there's an argument to be made that Bloodborne and Sekiro are FromSoft's finest work, but that is of course very subjective. In the case of Sekiro, I know it was polarizing among some Souls fans. It sounds like those of you who miss the RPG elements in Sekiro will be right at home in the world of Elden Ring. Another thing that puts me at ease is that it's a new IP. To me, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro are unquestionably the 4 best games FromSoft has done. That's not to say that I don't thoroughly enjoy Dark Souls 2 and 3, especially the Ring City DLC, but time and again my thought that Miyazaki does his best work on original titles is reinforced by the likes of his later projects. I think that's an underrated strength of the studio. We live in an age of franchising and sequels. Not that I'm not excited to see the next step in a franchise I love continue, but it's incredible to see a studio put out masterpiece after masterpiece in less than a decade, all having original themes and gameplay elements. That's why I'm already confident in everything Elden Ring will have to offer. I'm not gonna blow my expectations out of proportion unfairly, but at this point, FromSoft and Miyazaki have proven that they know how to create the gaming experiences that I crave. And with George R.R. Martin on board, I'm so excited to see how their storytelling develops. Phew, that's a lot from just a name, teaser trailer, and a 10-question interview, but I can't help but indulge in my excitement. But what other titles from E3 stood out for me this year? First up is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Let me disclaim that I only watched the 14 minutes of gameplay footage they released and nothing more. These are my impressions based on that alone. I also want to say that I've been dying for a narrative-driven Star Wars game for ages, and it's exciting for it to be one in the shoes of a Jedi. There are a few developers that I hold in as high of regard as I do FromSoft, but one of them is Naughty Dog. From Crash Bandicoot in my childhood, to the adventures of Nathan Drake, to the grim journey of Joel and Ellie, Naughty Dog has found a way to blend compelling storytelling that rivals film with a gameplay hook to match it. Respawn seems to be taking cues from both Naughty Dog and FromSoft when it comes to gameplay. Much of the cinematic styling and platforming reminded me of Uncharted. Then the combat at times reminded me of something bombastic like Uncharted when tearing through stormtroopers, to calculated like Sekiro when hitting and deflecting some of the tougher enemies. There were clearly deflections involved that were at the risk of taking damage. There was even a moment when deflecting a spider allowed for an insta-kill death blow, with the footage previously showing the spiders to be rather beefy. I will say that the damage taken by your characters seem rather forgiving, and the force powers seem rather OP on the weaker enemies. That said, they didn't have too much of an effect on the tougher ones, with them often leading to punishment. Though I do wonder if there's something deeper here with the stamina bar underneath the health bar that would allow you to use the force on anyone. The platforming looked pretty solid, but I will admit that it looked a bit weightless and like it required little contextual input from the player. Using a lightsaber to light a dark cave was neat, and I liked the creative uses of the force in the environment to progress. The story of releasing Wookiees with a team working with you behind the scenes was neat. The musical cues were all reminiscent of the movies. The protagonist was a little bland but had enough charisma to make me intrigued, and the little droid is pretty cute. It's even used for healing and shows the in-game map in a really unique way. From what I saw, many people's reactions to this game were extremely whelming, but I'm really hopeful after seeing the initial gameplay. Let's see, what else was there? Sif looks pretty great in that new Pokemon game. I love that each entry in the main franchise has its gimmicks. Mega Evolution with a Parisian theme, Z-moves and trials in a tropical setting. Then oi, take this you cunt! Look at my massive fucking Raichu! Jesus, Game Freak, I'm in. I've also never played a Tales game, but when that shonen protagonist pulled a sword out of that girl's tits, I was sold. Xbox Scarlet. Both PS5 and Xbox Scarlet are talking about 8K, 120 FPS, and better loading times. I barely even notice loading times in games anymore, but you know what I do notice? 30 frames per second. How about you take me out to dinner with a rock solid 1080p and 60 frames before I get in bed with 8K? Tasing people as a grandma looked pretty sick. I'm excited to hear more about Link's Awakening today. I'm praying for something Metroid related, even though I know they just restarted development on Metroid Prime 4. For the love of God, I have trouble saying this name. Ori and the Will of the Wisps looks as gorgeous as ever. Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop both caught my attention. And Gods and Monsters look more interesting than the 48 Tom Clancy games that preceded it, but I do want to see some gameplay. Oh, and I'm extremely into Death Stranding. I know it wasn't at E3 properly, but God am I in for whatever Kojima is cooking up for us. Games I was disappointed were absent included Cuphead's DLC, Hollow Knight Silksong, and more info on Neo 2 and Code Vein, even though they just had demos out. Rocksteady is still also developing whatever they are under a rock, and maybe someday they'll let us in. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Cyberpunk 2077. With the masterpieces that are The Witcher 2 and 3, CD Projekt Red is in the same echelon as Naughty Dog and Fromsoft for me. The cyberpunk genre is one of my favorite settings, so if you take their storytelling and game design and put that in that universe, I'm sold. But now you're giving me Keanu Reeves too? I'm sadly a scrub who hasn't seen any of the John Wick movies, but I've enjoyed him in what I have seen. Plus, he had more stage presence than the rest of the suits combined throughout Microsoft's conference. While it was clear he had a script to deliver, he did it with charisma and broke to have fun with the audience. He seems like a lovely guy. Also, has anyone noticed how many actors are getting involved in gaming these days? As a fan of storytelling in games, I couldn't be more excited, both for high-profile involvement in gaming and Cyberpunk 2077. But of course, that's just my own take on what we saw at E3. Let me know what you liked most from the conferences and what you thought of Elden Ring in the comments below. Keep in mind that I made this video before Nintendo's conference, so any big announcements from there will be missing. I'll be hanging out in the comments, so feel free to ask me anything about it. I'm gonna get back to the grindstone working on 10 Things I Love Sekiro and the Ocarina of Time boss ranking. I wanna thank you all for watching today. Much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.